Hello, everyone. My name is Gilda Ross, and I am the coordinator of the GPS Parent Series. I couldn't be more excited to have you here. Every time we host Dr. Greene, we have more people waiting in the wings than any other program because they know that this is a program that every parent, staff person as well, should be listening to. So thank you for the gift of your time. Our ask of you is to please do share this resource with others. You saw the list of all of the schools and organizations that are our promotional partners. We want everyone to know that this is free to everyone, no registration always. We thank our sponsors who make this all possible. They don't care where you live. They want you getting the inspiration and the education. So thank you for that. Quickly, upcoming programs I want to mention to you. This week on Thursday, we have a program, Early Child. It's in Spanish. Go to the website, get the information on that one at 7 p.m. And next week on October 7th, for the first time, we will be welcoming Judson Brewer. Judson Brewer has two important books, The Craving Mind and Unwinding Anxiety. So you want to join us for that one. The same week, on Thursday of that week, we'll be talking about why before where, career preparation for the next generation. That's Thursday, October 9th. Ken Wallace and Jason Siegel will be talking about that topic, noon and 7 p.m. We go into the next week of October, we'll be talking about motivation. Dr. David Yeager is a protege of Carol Dweck and her important work, What We Get Wrong When We Motivate and Communicate with Young People, October 15th, Wednesday, noon and 7 p.m. The book is called 10 to 25, Motivating Youth. Then Mary Sheedy comes to us on October 21st with a young child program, Raising a Spirited, Intense, Sensitive, Persistent, and Energetic Child on October 21st, noon and 7 p.m. We're not going to waste any more time. It's my honor to introduce the gentleman and friend who will be introducing Dr. Ross Greene today on his important book, Explosive Child. Kurt Johansson is the West Chicago Community High School District 94 Superintendent with the honors. Kurt, take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gilda. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Ross Greene, a clinical child psychologist and the best-selling and international author of several groundbreaking books, including The Explosive Child, Lost at School, Lost and Found, and Raising Human Beings. Dr. Greene served on the faculty at Harvard Medical School for over 20 years and is now founding director of the nonprofit Lives in Balance. He is an adjunct professor in the Department of Psychology at Virginia Tech and adjunct professor at the University of Technology in Sydney, Australia. He and his colleagues consult extensively with families, general and special education students, inpatient and residential facilities, and systems of juvenile detention based on his extensive evidence-based research on child behavior. We are delighted and honored to welcome Dr. Ross Greene back to GPS Parent Series Community Today. Dr. Greene.
Thank you for inviting me to do this again. Always a pleasure, and nothing I like talking about more than kids and the adults who hang out with them. For those of you who were looking for the original title, The Explosive Child, don't worry, I'll be talking about that. But I want to mostly focus on what it means to be a good parent, and definitely want to save some time at the end for questions. So I'm going to try really hard to leave at least 10 minutes for questions. What it means to be a good parent is the title, but the model is called Collaborative and Proactive Solutions. And although that model, CPS as I'll call it, in your area that might more often refer to Chicago public schools, but for me it refers to Collaborative and Proactive Solutions. It doesn't just apply to explosive kids, it applies to all kids. And I should let you know, I have a new book coming out in January or February, depending on how quickly the publisher can move. It's actually for schools. It's called, but I suspect a lot of parents will read it as well. It's called The Kids Who Aren't Okay. And the subtitle, when I can remember it, is The Urgent Case for Reimagining Support, Belonging, and Hope in schools. I only write a book if I feel like I have something important to say that goes beyond things I've said already. Um, and here's what's alarming, and this is where I start in the new book. We know that the data on kids these days is actually quite alarming. Um, and many of you have probably read about this, but we have higher than ever rates of anxiety, depression. Ask any educator about concerning behavior at school, and they'll tell you it's worse than ever. And the behaviors are more extreme than ever. We have very high rates of suicidality in kids these days, and we have very high rates of chronic school absenteeism in the United States. Somewhere between a quarter and a fifth of kids are not showing up regularly at school. Now, that should set off some alarm bells. And I know that that's kind of cliche these days because the news media makes everything an alarm bell. Everything is breaking news. Some breaking news actually is breaking news. But it prompted me to ask the question, well, what has changed? And what especially prompted me to ask that question is the fact that a lot of people are pointing to social media these days as the culprit. That's not my reading of the research. A lot of the data on social media is correlational. The best data tell us that kids who are way overusing social media are the ones who are most likely to have their mental health adversely affected by social media. I would be the absolute first to agree. Social media is a factor. There are things in social media that are not good for kids to be exposed to, not good for adults to be exposed to. So social media is playing its role, but if we are only focused on social media, I believe we are missing most of the picture. So your school system can take away cell phones if they want to, but you don't want to miss most of the picture or think you've accomplished that much by doing it. Kids are going to access social media even if they're not at school. Taking away cell phones mostly will be helpful on academics. Maybe it cuts back on at-school covert bullying. But we can't move forward on thinking about what's up with kids these days and only focus on social media. We've got to look at the bigger picture. So that's what I do in chapter 1 of this new book. And where do I start? I start with school shootings. 400 plus of them since Columbine. The kids who I talk to are very scared of being shot at school. And by the way, so are their educators, which makes perfect sense. But the research tells us about 2/3 of kids are anxious about that. And about 1/3 of kids are very anxious about that. And the statistics are about the same for educators. That's the ecosystem in which kids and educators are functioning at school. But that's not the only thing that's changed over the last 2.5 decades. Columbine was 1999. I'm not sure if we have any reason to think that school shootings are going to decrease anytime soon, because quite frankly, I don't think we've done much about it. And that's not a political statement. I would make that statement no matter who's in charge. We haven't done much about it, which I think is a interesting message to be sending to kids and educators about the degree to which we value their lives. We've done very little about it. High stakes testing, next on my list. This was this fascinating but horrible idea. Driven, by the way, many people don't know this, driven, by the way, by capitalism. Big money in high stakes testing. High stakes testing is where you're telling kids that they have to get over a certain bar by the end of the school year and telling their educators that they've got to get the kids over the bar by the end of the school year. Doesn't take into account, quite frankly, a key word that I'm going to be talking about on the very next slide, the developmental variability that is guaranteed to be walking in the door. Every classroom, every kid, developmental variability, which is a fancy way of saying every kid is different. High stakes testing says take all those every kids that are different and get them over the same bar by the end of the school year. I'm much more interested in, here's another theme you're going to be hearing soon. I think it's a whole lot more effective to meet kids where they're at. A whole lot more effective. And I'm jumping the gun here, but that is the definition of good parenting. Meeting your kid where they're at. More to come. High stakes testing was a terrible idea. Put enormous pressure on kids and educators. I've had many educators say to me, it took all the humanity out of my job. Given that we've always relied on educators to be among the most important socialization agents in our society, it is time to put the humanity back into the job. I'm not going to spend all this time on all of these because I need to move on, but zero tolerance policies. This was actually a response to Columbine. And as usual, what we decided in response to school shootings is to tighten things up, become even more punitive. Zero tolerance policies was where we came up with a list of all the things kids weren't allowed to do at school and a list of all of the punishments that were going to occur if they did those things they weren't allowed to do. And that was an effort to keep us safer. I don't think anybody feels safer. And the data are in on zero tolerance policies. They made things worse. Now I'm going to speed up. Being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, not easy. The world is designed for neurotypicals. A lot of research telling us that being a boy is very difficult these days. There's a lot of research telling us that being a girl is very difficult these days. More difficult. There's a lot of research telling us being LGBTQ plus is very difficult these days. Tons of research telling us that being Black or brown is as difficult as ever these days. One arena in which we know that to be true are the statistics on the use of corporal punishment in American schools. We still hit kids in American public schools. In 17 states, we do about 50 to 100,000 times every school year. The statistics telling us that we are doing those things disproportionately to kids with disabilities and those with Black and brown skin. There's actually research telling us that being white is more difficult these days. There are many people who are surprised by that one because they're aware that whites still are economically tremendously advantaged over Black people in the United States, but there are white people who are suffering more than some others, especially those who are not college educated. Home and family life has changed over the last 2 decades. Takes 2 incomes to produce the lifestyle that one used to. We cannot view children's mental health outside the mental health of their caregivers. And the research is telling us that caregivers are doing even worse than their kids. I have read that our politics haven't been this divided since the Civil War. Some folks point to the decline of religion as a factor over the last 2 decades. I wouldn't argue with that. There are a lot of people who used to rely on religion as their guidepost for right and wrong, for community. If you don't have religion, you lose those things. And then finally, last on my list, social media. It's a factor. It's not as big a factor as people are making it out to be. And let me repeat myself. If all we're focused on is social media, look at what we're going to be missing. So if you asked me for an explanation as to why more kids are not okay these days, It's on the screen, and this is not an exhaustive list. What's interesting is most kids are still doing okay, despite all of these things. So that's good, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be paying attention. And we should especially be paying attention to the ones who aren't doing okay. All right. As promised. No, actually, this is not the slide I promised you. It comes next. Kids have come a long way. Back in the day, and this, by the way, kids are real people is a fairly recent phenomenon. Back in the day, and it wasn't that long ago, most kids, except for those who were wealthy, were basically viewed as there to ensure the survival of the species, there to help out on the farm, there to contribute income. It's in evolutionary terms, it is in very recent history that we've actually viewed kids as real people. Now, that's good because that says we now appreciate that they should be treated with the dignity and respect that they deserve. But along with being real people, there's some interesting things that come along with that. We're going to diagnose you, we're going to medicate you, we are going to study you. All good, I guess, if it's making life better for kids. The jury is out on whether all that studying, all that diagnosing, and all that medicating is making things better for kids. Certainly, some kids are doing better because they're on medication that's helpful to them. Some kids do benefit from a psychiatric diagnosis. It gives us a little bit of information about what's going on with that kid. Totally insufficient information, though. You don't want to parent based on a diagnosis. The diagnosis refers to kids who are at the extreme end of the curve in a particular domain. Just a few examples. Kids diagnosed with ADHD are supposed to be at the extreme end of the curve on hyperactivity, impulsiveness, and inattention. That's who's supposed to get diagnosed with ADHD. Here's the interesting piece. Though they may well be hyperactive, inattentive, and impulsive, there's a whole lot more to them than that. So while I appreciate diagnostic pride, the diagnosis is utterly insufficient for helping us understand the whole kid. My specialty, allegedly, I don't really want to own this, but allegedly, I am an expert in oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD. Those are the kids who are at the extreme end of the curve on, well, that's the explosive child, on noncompliance, defiance, refusing to do what they're told, throwing a lot of tantrums, autism spectrum disorder. Those are kids who are supposed to be at the extreme end of the curve on difficulty with some social skills, being inflexible, rigid, black and white thinkers. That's not the whole kid. The new one that has come down the pike, pathological demand avoidance, tells us that this is a kid who is at the extreme end of the curve in terms of their receptivity to having expectations and demands placed upon them. I could go on forever. Anxiety, depression. Here's the key point. I don't think you parent based on diagnosis, and I don't think you should define your kid based on diagnosis. I think we've overdone it a little bit. And yes, I appreciate the pride that goes along with a diagnosis as much as anybody, but that's only a minor facet of this kid. And we don't want to get too caught up in that. I'd rather focus on the respect and dignity part of kids now being recognized as real people. Here's the term. And you know, I don't know why I neglected this term in my work, but it has come back in full force in my consciousness because This is what defines all human beings. It's what defines all kids. Developmental variability. Roughly defined, it means every kid is different. Every adult is different. We're all different. We've been defining different by diagnosis. I'd rather give everybody the diagnosis of developmentally variable. Because that's the reality. Why peg kids based on the extremes? We're all developmentally variable. Yours truly, case in point. I have some skills. Fixing things around the house is not one of them, though I'm getting better at it. Math, definitely not my strong suit. Now, if my parents, one of whom is actually still alive and kicking at the age of 90, if they had been bound and determined that I become an accountant, life would have been much harder. Math was not my gig. And it's interesting, sometimes when something isn't a kid's gig, it tends to be what we focus on. IEPs, individual education plans, are not focused, generally speaking, on what the kid's good at. It's focused on what the kid's bad at. A kid who I work with recently said, how come at school they only focus on the things I'm not good at? I spend most of my day focused on the things I'm not good at. Interesting point. The million-dollar question is, while we don't want to sell any kid short, so we've got to be careful about this, how good do we get kids at things that they're not already good at? We don't want to rule out the possibility, and I've seen this happen, that a kid is not very good at something in the first grade and kicks in a later grade. But I don't know how often that happens. Developmental variability is always there for all of us, cutting across all realms: academics, social skills, athletic skills, you name it, there's variability. And we all carry that diagnosis. We've already covered this one. It's just that I jumped the gun on it, so I'm going to skip it now. Here's the definition of good parenting. Your job as a parent, your goal as a parent, is to meet your kid where they're at. And if you have more than one kid, where they're at is probably going to be different for each of your kids. How'd they get where they're at? Well, they were kind of born where they're at. This idea that kids are a lump of clay, and this was popular in the 1900s. Kids are a lump of clay to be molded to our wishes. If you have a kid, you know that's not true. I have two. They're 25 and 28 years old now. They popped out completely different. And 25 and 28 years later, they are completely different still. They're completely different. Same parents, allegedly the same gene pool, completely different. Kids are somebody the minute they pop out. Infants are somebody. And by the way, there's developmental variability the minute an infant pops into this world. There's different temperaments. There's different skills that infants have. Some infants are more communicative than others. Some are more reactive than others. I could go on forever about how infants are different, but get that blank slate thing out. It's not true. Kids are not a lump of clay. They are somebody the minute they pop into this world. Now, where does life get interesting? Well, sometimes us parents have certain ideas about who our kids should be. Sometimes we have very strong ideas about that. And sometimes, well, a lot of the time that's driven by our own anxiety our admirable desire to want the best for our kids. Sometimes we try too hard on that. Sometimes we're comparing our kid to other kids of the same age, grade, gender. If you asked me, what's the number one biggest mistake over my, at this point, I don't know when I guess 35 years of working with families, 35 years of working with families, I can tell you the biggest mistake I see. Trying to make your kid something they're not. Trying to turn your kid into something they're not. Kids have skills. Kids have preferences. Now, at the moment, you might be thinking, but I'm the parent. Where do I fit into this equation? This can't all be about my kid. I've got to get my kid ready for the real world. The real world is waiting. Society is waiting, and society ain't easy. In fact, society is more complex than it's ever been. I've got to get my kid ready for the real world. Actually, you got to meet your kid where they're at. If you do that, they'll be ready for the real world. If you try to turn your kid into something they're not, I do not think that's going to go well at all. So, job one, figure out who your kid is. Who's my kid? Values, preferences, skills. What do I got here? And that means, at least temporarily, putting on hold. Here's what I want for my kid. That's coming up. Don't worry. We're not leaving you out. You're still the parent. And let there be no doubt, you cannot parent without having expectations for your kid. But the definition of good parenting is meeting your kid where they're at. All right. A very important concept, expectation management. I talk about this more with schools, talk about it a lot in that forthcoming book that I mentioned. Because in schools, we've made it really hard because of high stakes testing in particular to manage our expectations well. In schools, educators are feeling pressured to put expectations on kids they already know the kid can't meet. What happens when we put expectations on kids we already know they can't meet? We cause concerning behavior. Concerning behavior is the kid's frustration response. I use the term concerning behavior and the term frustration response interchangeably. Concerning behavior is the kid's frustration response. For a very long time, we've driven by some very influential theories that I was trained in. We've been focused primarily on kids' frustration responses. We've been primarily focused on kids' behavior. And a lot of us mental health professionals and a lot of educators as well, and a lot of parents too, were trained in some rather straightforward strategies on how to modify those behaviors. What we've been modifying is the kid's frustration response. What we haven't been paying attention to are the expectations the kid is having difficulty meeting that are causing the frustration response. And that's where the gold is. I have begun saying lately that non-compliance is good. Non-compliance is informative. Now, this is very interesting because for a long time, good parenting was defined by having a kid who is compliant. But let's just tease that apart a little bit. All compliance tells you is that a kid is able to meet your expectation and is meeting it. That's what compliance tells you. What does non-compliance tell you? Non-compliance tells you your kid is having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. I think it's good that the kid is letting you know that. Non-compliance can be informative Non-compliance can help you know your kid better if you're curious, if you take the time to ask. You can focus on behavior, frustration responses, till the cows come home. All you'll really know is what you already know. Here's what my kid does when they're frustrated. That's not a revelation. You know already. Um, Better yet, what's my kid getting frustrated about? What expectations are my kid having difficulty meeting? And maybe my kid will tell me about that so I can understand what's getting in their way. Maybe we could work on that together. Expectation management means managing your expectations well for your kid based on the hand you've been dealt. It's a huge part of meeting your kid where they're at. Um, Huge. I fervently believe that if we were managing our expectations better, we would be managing behavior far less. If we aren't managing our expectations well, we're just going to have a very frustrated kid who's exhibiting all kinds of concerning behaviors. And if all we're doing is busy modifying those behaviors, that kid and the adults who are working with that kid are just going to get more and more frustrated. This is huge. So here's what we've got: developmental variability, meeting kids where they're at. Don't parent based on diagnosis, expectation management. Let's keep going. Questions at the end, promise. Oof, this is huge. This is not only the theme of the collaborative and proactive solutions model, I got to tell you, this is the theme of my entire life's work. Kids do well if they can. 6 little words that no matter where I'm lucky enough to travel all over the world over the course of the last 35 years. Next week, I'll be in Copenhagen, Oslo, Stockholm. The following week, I'll be in Dublin. Really cool. Collaborative and Proactive Solutions has exploded in Ireland. And we are holding a conference that you could actually watch online. Oof, I got to put this on the Lives in the Balance website. I'll give you the website at the end, and I don't think there's any place to register for it. You could watch it online if you wanted to. It is a celebration of CPS, where we'll be having speakers, me included, from throughout Ireland, talking about how the CPS model has transformed their services. And it has been especially impactful with adults with disabilities and kids with disabilities. The kids who aren't doing okay, the adults who aren't doing okay. But kids do well if they can means if the kid could do well, they would do well. If the kid isn't doing well, something must be getting in the way. We got to figure out what's getting in the way. And now you already know what's getting in the way. What's causing kids' concerning behaviors? What's causing their frustration responses? Expectations they're having difficulty meeting. Now, let me say this about those expectations, because I gave short shrift to you as parents a few minutes ago. I left the last slide a little prematurely. What do you bring to the table? Experience, wisdom, values. Can't do without it. Now, that experience, wisdom, and values is supposed to inform your expectations for your kid. Let me give you a few examples. If based on experience and wisdom, you believe that if we eat food in our bedroom at home, we could get mice. And you might further believe, based on experience, that it's not that much fun to have mice running around your house. that experience should lead to an expectation. We're not going to eat food in our house, in our family. Your values, experience, wisdom should lead to your expectations. That should be a direct link. If because of experience, you know that if human beings don't get enough sleep, they're not going to perform well the next day. That should lead to an expectation around bedtime. Now, life is good. By the way, let's talk about values for a second. If you have certain values around how people are treated, around how animals are treated, about how the environment should be treated, then that should translate into your expectations about how your kid treats people, the environment, family members, and animals. That's where your expectations should be coming from. I'll tell you where your expectations should not be coming from. Other third graders, other parents. You get to own your experience, wisdom, and values. You get to set expectations for your kid. Life is good if your kid is meeting a particular expectation, and kids will meet your expectation if they can. What if they can't? If they can't, you've got a problem to solve, because what we call unmet expectations in the CPS model is unsolved problems. And now the rubber is about to meet the road, because how you go about solving problems with your kid, how you go about handling the expectations your kid is having difficulty meeting, will be a major determinant as it relates to whether you're taking your child's developmental variability into account, whether you're practicing expectation management, and whether you're meeting your kid where they're at. So here we go. You have three options. They are called This is our second to last slide. We're doing well on time. We should have lots of time for questions. You have three options for handling unsolved problems. And I have talked about these three options in every book I've ever written. Those three options, for ease of exposition, are called Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. Plan A is where you're solving the problem unilaterally. That's where you are divining what's making it hard for your kid to meet an expectation. And based on what you've divined, no input from the kid, you have also divined the solution. Notice who's missing from that equation: the kid. I honestly don't think that's the best way to meet kids where they're at. It's not a good way to know what's really going on with your kid so you can meet them where they're at. You need info. Plan B is where you're solving the problem collaboratively. Same problem, same expectation, completely different approach to solving it. I'm going to talk about the three steps of Plan B on the next slide, and I hope it will become crystal clear why Plan B is a much better way to meet your kid where they're at. Plan C is where you're putting a particular expectation on hold, at least for now. Why would you do that? Because once you identify your kid's unsolved problems, some kids, especially those that for a long time we've been calling explosive, but also potentially anxious or depressed, some kids are going to have a lot of unsolved problems, and you're not going to be able to solve them all at once. So prioritizing is one reason you would use Plan C. You can't solve them all at once. If you try to solve all those problems at once, you're going to end up solving none. So Plan C is where you're putting a particular expectation on hold for now as an act of prioritizing, or what we might call, another good word, triaging. Can't fix everything at once. Took a long time for that pile of unsolved problems to accumulate. It's going to take a while to get through them. Another reason you would use Plan C is because after some thought, you've decided you don't think your kid can even meet that expectation at this point in their development. Given their developmental variability, you've decided, I don't think it makes sense to have that expectation right now. A parent who I know felt very strongly that her 4-year-old daughter should start not needing her to escort her to the bathroom every time she needed to go to the bathroom. I asked for the rationale for that, and the mom said, well, she's 4. Then I heard more about this kid and this mom, and I learned that they had gone through a tough spell in their life where for about 2 years, the kid was actually by the mother's side at almost all times. When I heard that, I said, do you think your daughter is capable at this point in her development? Not talking about 4-year-olds in general, talking about your daughter. Do you think, given what you've told me about your daughter and her developmental trajectory, do you think she's capable of going to the bathroom on her own yet? The mother said, no. I said, then you might want to put that one on hold until you think your daughter is capable of meeting that expectation. Because right now, because you're trying to get her to meet that expectation, you're getting a lot of frustration responses, and that's making things worse. And then in some of the more severe populations that I work with, Plan C is also about stabilizing. Best way to stabilize, this is in education settings too, by the way, the best way to stabilize a kid, aside from medication, which you may or may not need if you do Plan C, is to remove all the expectations that are setting the kid off. Get rid of the smoke, get rid of the fire, then see what you got. Whoops, I put that slide in. Interesting. There are 3 steps, and you're going to get these slides. So everything I just said about Plan C is on a slide. I just forgot to put it in there. Hooray. All right. There are 3 steps that are involved in solving a problem collaboratively. They are called the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and the invitation step. If anything defines my career, besides kids do well if they can, it's these 3 steps. The names of the steps I always say don't matter that much, although I like the name of the empathy step very much. What's going on in the empathy step? It's where you are gathering information from your kid about what's making it hard for them to meet a particular expectation. And you're doing that proactively. What you are not doing is waiting for the next time your kid is having difficulty brushing their teeth before going to bed at night before you try to have this conversation. Number one, there's an excellent chance your kid has been having difficulty brushing their teeth before going to bed at night for many years. If it's been many years, that unsolved problem is highly predictable. And if it's predictable, you can solve it proactively, not reactively. By the way, just to be blunt, the fact that your kid is still having difficulty meeting that expectation is a very clear indication that that problem isn't solved yet. And that no amount of stickers or timeouts is going to solve it. I was doing a podcast pre-COVID. I was on a father podcast. This gentleman did father podcast, and he invited me to be on. And he was telling me about his 3-year-old daughter. Now, that's significant because a lot of people don't think you can do these 3 steps with 3-year-olds, but that's because they haven't checked out the CPS with young kids section on the Lives in the Balance website yet, where you will see amazing video of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds participating in this very process. And just in case you're wondering, can you do these 3 steps with non-speaking kids in one way or another? Absolutely. Anyways, this father was telling me about his 3-year-old daughter who was, as fate would have it, having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. But he said to me, I thought I already knew it was making it hard for her to brush her teeth before going to bed at night. He tells me he was sure it was the taste of the toothpaste. So he's telling me 5 or 6 different flavors of toothpaste later, his daughter's still having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. So he says to me, so I finally did plan B. I'm thinking, you finally did plan B? And people tell me they don't have time to do plan B. Look at how long it took you to go through 5 or 6 different flavors of toothpaste. Anyways, here's what the empathy step sounds like. I've noticed you've been proactive. I've noticed you've been having difficulty brushing your teeth before going to bed at night. What's up? His 3-year-old daughter said, when you brush my teeth with the electric toothbrush, it gets water all over my face. And I hate getting water all over my face when you're brushing my teeth with the electric toothbrush. I said to the father, well, now there's a concern 5 to 6 different flavors of toothpaste would never address. The define adult concern step is where us adults are entering our concern into consideration, the exact same concern that might previously have led us into plan A, now leading us into plan B. Your concerns are the answer to the question, why is it important that this expectation be met? Here comes your experience, wisdom, and values kicking in. Told you were still in the mix. The empathy step tells you where your kid is at. The define adult concern step helps your kid benefit from your experience, wisdom, and values. This is a partnership. My concern is that if we don't brush your teeth before you go to bed at night, you could get cavities, and it kind of hurts to get cavities filled. And to tell you the truth, I'd rather not spend the money if I don't have to. Experience, wisdom, and values coming at you in step number 2, the invitation step. This is where you and your kid are putting your heads together, collaborating on a solution. But, and this is the last point I'm going to make, a solution that must meet 2 criteria. Got to be realistic. This is not pie in the sky. Both parties got to be able to do what they're agreeing to do. And it's got to be mutually satisfactory. That's even more important, meaning the solution truly addresses the concerns of both parties. Here's what I've been saying a lot lately. And it's not just my work with thousands of kids and their caregivers that bears me out on it. It's world history that bears me out on it, including current world history. If a solution is not realistic and mutually satisfactory, I promise you, this problem is still unsolved. Guaranteed. But you're not going to be able to come up with a solution that's mutually satisfactory unless you know what the concerns of both parties are. Where do us human beings go wrong so often? We don't do the first 2 steps. We don't listen to each other. We don't know what's getting in each other's way. We just jump straight to solutions, which we start throwing at each other. A scenario known as dueling solutions. Now, dueling solutions, best referred to as a power struggle, is an interesting setup. In a power struggle, all you're trying to do is figure out who's going to win and who's going to lose. And who's going to win in a power struggle? Whoever has the power. So in a power struggle, all we're doing is jockeying around, trying to figure out who has the power. When you're solving problems collaboratively, that's a win-win proposition. Who's going to win? Both of you. What does winning mean? You both got your concerns addressed. This is how you meet kids where they're at. This is how you take into account your child's unique developmental variability. Plan C is how you manage your expectations. So you're not putting expectations on your kid you already know they can't meet, you've probably got time. You've just heard my definition of being a good parent. If you need any more I got to tell you, getting me to stick to 50 minutes to talk about this, not an easy task, but we've done it. But there's a whole lot of information waiting for you out there. And if you go to the Lives in the Balance website, all that information is free. So don't hesitate. And now we're going to do some questions. I'm going to bet there are some. Gilda, you'll have to tell me how I access them or whether you're going to read them.
I'll read them to you. I will. And Kurt is coming back on as well. I learned some new words: developmental variability, uh, their expectation management, some of the things I've heard before, the importance of empathy, being curious, but kids do well if they can. If we walk away with that as our starting point, we are getting it. Thank you so, so, so much. So I'm going to read to you what I've seen so far. Someone is saying, I love this. Figure out who your kid is. What are their strengths, their needs, their interests? Take yourself as the parent out of it. And her question, a follow-up with that is, repeat what we should be focusing on versus managing our child's frustration response.
We should be focused on the expectations kids are having difficulty meeting.
Okay.
First, we should be focused, and this is the expectation management part, on whether we actually believe our kid can meet an expectation. This is critical. We often throw expectations at kids for any variety of reasons that if we really thought about it, we would say, I don't even think they can do that yet. Okay, those are not expectations worth putting on your kid. That's a frustration response waiting to happen. You can wait until your kid is developmentally ready to meet that expectation. And by the way, many parents, but also educators ask me, because educators are petrified that they will sell a kid short. They'd rather actually err on the side of putting expectations on kids they can't meet than err on the side of putting expectations, not putting those expectations on kids. That's a good way to cause a lot of behavior problems in a school and cause the rates of detention, suspension, restraint, seclusion to go up as well. That doesn't make any sense. But first think about whether your kid can meet the expectation. And then if they're not, and by the way, here's my very imperfect algorithm for that. If your kid, this is imperfect. If a kid can meet an expectation sometimes, it's in range. If a kid at this point in their development is not able to ever meet a particular expectation, I'm going to feel pretty safe in assuming that it's out of range. That doesn't mean you've capitulated, because there's nothing about capitulating in this model. There's meeting your kid where they're at in this model, not capitulating. Decide when your kid is able to meet that expectation. Then put that expectation on the kid. So the expectation is not gone forever. It's just gone for now, because it doesn't make sense to put expectations on kids you already know they can't meet. But what you're focused on are those expectations that your kid is having difficulty meeting, not the frustration responses that are being caused by those unmet expectations. Frustration responses and concerning behaviors are synonyms. You're in the problem-solving business. If your kid's having difficulty meeting an expectation and you decide they can't at this point in development, plan C. If a kid's having difficulty meeting an expectation and you feel they can because you've seen it sometimes, plan B.
Question. Anything specific you want to say to the parents of teenagers about the process?
Nope.
Okay.
The 3 steps are the 3 steps, no matter what the unsolved problem. So yes, I picked a seemingly benign one, teeth brushing, because the story is illustrative, but I use the exact same 3 steps on difficulty being home in time for curfew, unsafe sex, overuse of illicit substances. It's the 3 steps, whether the kid is 3 or 17. And by the way, if we wanted to go lower than 3, we could. I think we start collaborating with infants the minute they pop out. If we notice that an infant is in distress, what we're going to do is and they can't talk to us, so that changes things a little bit. But we're gonna guess, and we're gonna try to apply an intervention that we think will relieve their distress. And here's the collaborating part. We are then 100% dependent on the infant to let us know how we did. One thing I'll say about infants, if you got it right, they're going to let you know it. And if you get it wrong, they're going to let you know it. That's called collaborating.
I circled curious many, many times here on my notes here. Kurt, you've got a question, I know.
Well, I see that there's one in the chat here that I want to make sure we get to. The question is, could you please comment on strategies? Oh, it just shifted on me here. Could you please comment on strategies to help kids with unpredictable explosions? Example, my brother looked at my new Lego set. I didn't like it. 45 minutes of intense screaming.
The unpredictable ones are the toughest. Generally speaking, I have people start with the ones that are chronic. Here's why. The ones that are chronic are predictable and can be solved proactively. Once we get some muscle memory going on the part of all parties, we can solve problems together. We are not going to come up with solutions that don't work for you. We are listening. Once we have a little bit of muscle memory for that, sometimes in the heat of the moment, on a surprising one that's never happened before, we can solve a problem collaboratively just as it is coming up. But I like to have the muscle memory first because I got to tell you, doing those 3 steps in the heat of the moment, it's what I would do. Besides keeping everybody safe and trying to de-escalate things, it's what I would do. But we want to get some muscle memory going here for problem solving, because then the kid knows they're going to be heard. They know we're not going to throw a solution at them that doesn't work for them. They know we're curious. We want to know what's the matter. I just don't like putting people in a spot where they got to do that in the heat of the moment right off the bat. I'd rather start with the chronic ones.
You said something earlier I wanted to go back to. You said we want the best, but we try too hard sometimes. So how do we fight that within ourselves?
Pay attention. Pay attention to, sometimes we lose our vision because what's clouding our vision is what we want. We can never lose sight of what's going on in front of us. What's going on in front of us is our kid and the degree to which they are able to respond to our expectations for them. Pay attention. If your kid is having difficulty meeting an expectation, let your kid be your guide. Non-compliance is informative. There's something going on there, and it is something very much worth knowing. And if we simply plow through and use our will or our power to make it happen, we just missed a golden opportunity.
Kurt and I are both looking at this question. Find out who your kid is. So how can we do that? Well, especially like in the preteen years, it changes so quickly. So what are some good questions or ways to find out who our kid is?
Well, there are, and I didn't have time to go into them. The empathy step is a wonderful way to learn about your kid. Do you know that the number one complaint I get from parents is that their kid won't talk to them? And the number one complaint I get from kids is that their parents won't listen. What a tragedy that is. I don't think that's a given. I think it's a reflection of some ways in which people parent that end the conversation. How do you get to know your kid? The empathy step of Plan B. What I mentioned is there are what we call some drilling strategies that we teach people that are very helpful at gathering information from kids in that empathy step and helping kids talk to us, right? I mean, you can get to know your kid in all kinds of ways. You probably know if your kid is empathic toward animals. You probably know if your kid is scared of clowns. You don't need to do the empathy step to know those things about your kid. You know that if you're paying attention, your infant doesn't like bright lights or loud noises. In the case of my daughter, I knew that if she was getting cranky, it was either tired or food. It was always one of those two things. So if we're paying attention, we know. But on the ones that were not clear, on the expectations your kid is having difficulty meeting, that empathy step, what I'm always saying about the empathy step is be prepared for surprises. When you discover that what you thought was getting in your kid's way is not what's getting in your kid's way. That's how you get to know your kid beyond your own observations.
Kurt, final word?
Dr. Greene, I wish that we had another hour with you. No question, just a comment. Truly just a remarkable session. So grateful that you
Thank you
took
very
time out of your
much.
busy schedule. So thank you for that.
And I second that with a note about your generosity. You have allowed us, we will be sharing this on our YouTube channel. Last week we hosted Susan Kane on her book on quiet, which has some of the same conversations. I welcome you to go to the YouTube channel and see that program as well. And Dr. Greene, I can't wait for that book to come out, and welcome you back again to GPS. So thank you so much. Always.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for inviting me to do this.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. See you next time.